Hey, Nick here from After the Call. I just wanted to pop in quick because we were talking about last week about how I was going to start to call you out on all your tricks and strategies that you use for yourself. So I thought I would start with a shorter video, but pretty important one. And we call this by a lot of different names: avoidance, emotionally driven behaviors, etc., etc. But it's engaging in behaviors that you think are initially healthy or helpful, and then later maybe not noticing it or ignoring the consequence that actually just creates a cycle in which you engage in the behavior again. So there's a few things to this that obviously, it's a grandiose statement to claim that I can call you out on all of your different things, but I think what we are looking at is um, how I go about engaging in things that create stress or anxiety for me, and what do I do with that? So there's a certain level of clinical work that you might engage in, or there's a certain type of clinician who would suggest that distraction is this awesome approach to dealing with overwhelming things. I was one for the longest time, actually. So, distraction, and we talk about the different things, right? So we talk about walking away, we talk about mindfulness work, we talk about deep breathing, we talk about shelving it, we talk about all of these different strategies that we can use. Unfortunately, once we get a little bit further in our work, we actually begin to recognize or realize that doing those things are only allowing the short-term consequence of feeling better or getting relief. The long-term consequence of dealing with the actual problem is still there. So, or it's worse, right? Things such as this. So if I'm working, I might want to, and I get a fighting with my spouse, for instance, I might not want to go home, so I might do extra work at work, or I might leave early to get work done, right? And this is the excuse that I'll say to my, coworkers or self even or whatever. I'm behind in my work. I got to get it done, right? And so the reality is that I'm avoiding going home and dealing with those strategies, and I'm distracting myself with work. Now I hide under this noble excuse of getting work done, but in reality, I'm just avoiding doing those behaviors, or I'm just avoiding addressing the problem that's causing me the anxiety in the first place. So this builds off what we talked about last week with treating the cold and not the cough, right? So look in and reflect on yourself. What am I avoiding right now? It may be prevalent. It might be easy to pick up. You might understand immediately what you're avoiding. And then it becomes work on how do I break that into smaller and smaller chunks so that I can start to address that in kind of the stepwise fashion. We don't conquer everything all at once. We take it, we break it down into smaller chunks. And if you haven't thought of that, think about what I'm avoiding. Well, what am I avoiding doing? What emotion? Maybe start there. What emotion do I avoid the most? If it's fear, then what do I do? Do I, start avoiding going to places, start avoiding people, right? Maybe I don't want to talk about what's going on, so I start avoiding my friends or avoiding my family and start withdrawing because at the outset that seems safer to me. Like I'm not ready, I might say. I'm not ready to deal with those things, and that might be true, but instead of establishing healthy boundaries, we start removing ourselves from the equation. So look in and reflect on what emotions do I have the hardest time dealing with, and then mark them down, and then start looking at events. When that emotion came up last time, what did I do? What did I engage in? Uh, what kind of reaction did I go with? Did I, push everything away, get rid of the problem? Did I kind of retract into myself, right? Do I hate the feelings of confrontation so much that I just accept responsibility for all our arguments and fights in the relationship, etc.? So anyways, this is kind of the first. I think it'll probably be a couple videos as I look at different angles that come up for me in my counseling sessions for individuals, and look at how recognizing these as avoidant behaviors can go against some of the grain that we're normally taught in this, but also it can be uncomfortable because we start to pull the skin off a little bit from what it is that might keep us, or we think keeps us safe, when in reality is continuing to propagate our anxious feelings or other feelings going on. So anyways, this one all about calling you out on what you're avoiding. So pick an emotion that you don't like and start to look at how you try to avoid dealing with that emotion or how you try to avoid experiencing that emotion. You might be surprised what you find. Anyways, thanks for now. Cheers.